for joining us today. I want you to know that I will be. I'm very flexible about sending out materials for any who have questions about the program afterwards. So know that you can reach out at any time. My email address is on the Lancaster Country Day School website. And my contact information you should feel free to use and call anytime. I'm always happy to chat about admission and all things related to open houses in particular. This particular webinar will walk through the most common components of open houses with the goal of providing a structurally innovative foundation or template of each component of the event and hoping to find a balance for each component between presenting your features and marketing your advantages, what makes you different and special. I'd even argue that the first of these webinars on generating numbers is especially crucial. However, as your success grows in cultivating numbers, the pressure to have better yield among those who do arrive will grow over time. I'm also happy to send along any of the materials from that particular webinar along with talking points, so you can simply read through what I went over last week if that's something that might be of value. We're very pleased with the impact that our open house of numbers have had and the success that we've had in translating that. And the question for us now is how we translate the attendees we have into applicants. How do we get them to the next stage? And I hope we can unpack some key parts of most open house formats and isolate a few sensible tactics for improving yield. I would share as well that there are lots of different ways of doing open houses. I'm going to walk through one that's worked especially well for Lancaster Country Day. It has to do in part with the traditions that we've had over the years of doing it this way, but there are a lot of different ways of showcasing your school, and I hope today to open your mind to a few possibilities that have worked well for us and to invite questions about what the weaknesses of the particular format that I'm presenting might be. From making a good first impression to navigating conversations with key players to structuring a compelling core presentation, again, I hope to provide some tangible paths to even stronger open houses for you. I'll start with walking over arrival. Again, navigating first impressions has obvious importance, and we have a fairly elaborate, the Associate Director of Admission here, Jamie Beth Schindler, has a full template of every role that people have, so I know who's doing what, and I can provide guidance and for them in the days before the open house. Parking hosts may seem an unwise prioritization of energies, but actually it's worth keeping in mind at all stages of what is going through the minds of your visitors, including at the moment that they arrive. Particularly in areas where the competition is public school, good public schools or wealthy suburban public schools, perhaps as much as half of independent schools, a friendly, welcoming student can remove deep-seated fears and uncertainties and myths for families who are genuinely unfamiliar or even at times suspicious of independent schools, as strange as that may seem for some of us. Staffing a greeting area table with equally gracious parents and admission personnel is just as crucial. We have student greeters at the door, and they direct folks to the table. So at every stage, people feel as though they're arriving at an event that you've thought it through, that you're thinking about them from the start, and that they're getting individualized attention. I'd say a side note, your registration forms should be filled out with as much information as you already have. In other words, I would suggest that as people register that they do not go through a process of re-registering all the information they've already given you. That can be annoying and can take away from the opportunity for them to immediately start talking with families who are waiting to be good hosts and chat with them about your school. It also shows that you're professional and have an operation that can feed back to them what they've given to you and make sure that the information that they've given to you is in fact correct or that you've recorded it correctly. and they can make corrections on the sheet of paper you hand to them. They can fix errors, fill in missing parts, and provide you also some feedback about what led them there. I always have questions on my registration forms to get a sense of what of the different marketing tactics I'm using are in fact working. In your first venue, I would recommend considering background music from students. Again, unintrusive, not too harsh, inviting, ideally live, but it should be a small enough set of students to if it is live, to absolutely guarantee quality. I would not recommend having a big orchestra with lots of tuba players. Not that tuba players make any more mistake than anybody else, but you've heard that cacophony of sound that does not go over well necessarily, particularly if you're a small private school competing with a gigantic public school that has a marching band at the Friday night lights. So you want to impress them with music, make sure you're controlling that image so that you can really make a positive and true first impression for families. If possible, you can have as a backdrop, whether there is music or not, a revolving set of school life slides. Again, have a balance between interests and ages and students' backgrounds. Families will have a little time to watch. Again, be thoughtful about your market, which only you will know. The head of school introduction. Your head should be very familiar with the content of your core presentation, and you should converse strategically in advance to make sure his comments are in synchronicity with, but do not belabor the points you and other participants will be making. This is important to understand. Human beings listen productively for 20 minutes. And to watch a chart of people's ability to listen carefully and happily is to watch something fall off the side of a cliff after 20 minutes. People they tune out. And then they lose the ability to keep actively interested no matter who the speaker is or what the content is. With that in mind, any introductory talk, whether it's you introducing the head and the head giving a big presentation or the head introducing you, it should not be more than 8 minutes. The head's comments, their goal, their chosen anecdotes should fit like a piece of the puzzle. Everybody's market and service as a school is different, but the strategy shouldn't change. The core presentation, and I feel that this should be the director of admission, but including yours as the director, if you are the director, should know the science of how long folks can be alert. You've got to be aware of that, and you've got to, if you have someone who precedes you, whatever they might be, and they like to talk, you've got to be sure that you somehow break up and there's enough time without just sort of launching in. Or you've got to have some flash in your presentation that wakes them up. But again, I wouldn't go too far, but just be really aware of time and of the importance of starting with a clear mission for your audience. You want to have your talking points down, yes, but how you structure a mission in your opening talking points is very clear. Before I talk about content, I want to talk about body language. There is no excuse, absolutely no excuse for every admission director or every associate who's, for that matter, charged with speaking at length in front of groups to have some form of seminar training in public speaking. 70% of your influence has nothing to do with words. 70% has nothing to do with anything you cobble together to say. Whether it's a slideshow or a video or talking points, every piece of the core presentation must have a specific strategic rationale. It is dangerous for one administrator at one school to provide specific marketing priorities, but I will say this. In other words, for me, at one school to be telling you this is what your marketing priorities should be is a little dangerous, but I'll say this. For schools competing primarily with top public schools or less expensive parochial schools, I'd recommend going to the NAIS research on the 10 to 12 historic triggers for families who transition to private schools. The 10 or 12 clearly differentiable pieces, advantages of independent schools for families nationwide. The problem is that there's a real flat quality, meaning all of the reasons why people go to independent schools are pretty evenly distributed across these 10 or 12 reasons. And what schools often will do is they'll make the mistake, say, oh, we're going to hire this marketing consultant, and he's going to give us the magic bullet. And that person comes in and they say, I've got the magic bullet. Here are the 3 things that if people hear and you separate from these other schools in your area because you talk about these 3 things, you're going to win. No, that usually doesn't happen that way. What usually happens when you do that is you talk about 3 things that are very important, but they are not a lot more important than the 7 other things that aren't quite as important as those things. And when you don't address the 7 other things, those families who care about those 7 other things go to another school or aren't compelled to spend as much money as you're charging in your tuition. So I would recommend, again, to make sure in some way that families can access all, not the top 3, but all in a crisp and smart way of the following advantages. Better academic outcomes, ideally quantifiably better academic outcomes. Small classroom size with numbers connected to it. Better faculty with backing for what that constitutes. Not just we have better faculty, but we do national searches. Okay, our faculty have more master's degrees, etc. Diversity, whole child development, number of people involved in more than one varsity sport, or more than one varsity sport and a major other extracurricular like drama or music or the arts. Community service, international perspective, tactics in the classroom that involve collaboration. All of these pieces, safety. Again, a better educated and more committed parent community. The benefits, if you have it, of K through 12 or multi-division schools that interact with each other. Better college counseling and implicitly better college placement. And better preparation for the workplace expectations of the 21st century. Now, you can't use all of them, but at some point you need to present these. And I'd recommend, or I'd suggest, that an open house is the best opportunity to do that, because working in 8 slides is possible. Marketers that tell you to focus on 2 or 3 miss the reality that families' priorities are very, very broadly spread when it comes to our schools, and that a failure from beginning to end of the admission funnel to touch at some point on all these points will not only leave many families behind, it will guarantee that if families come to your school, they're more likely to leave sooner than you'd like them to. For schools engaged with fierce competition with other similarly strong schools, while you may want to emphasize a few things more than other things, you need to keep it in balance with the other factors I've just talked about. I would argue that the core presentation should be either subtly or directly focused more on advantages than information. It is not time to talk about the facts about your middle school's curriculum necessarily. If you have a breakout session and an opportunity to answer questions about that, that's terrific. If you've got a curriculum guide that you can point to and suggest that they take a close read, that's great. But be careful, you only have a certain amount of time and you're going to lose them. And it needs to be about what is different in your school. And oftentimes public schools are coming up with curriculum and saying it's all about curriculum, it's all about curriculum, we have a great curriculum, you don't need to go to that private school. Well, if it was all about curriculum, public schools would be healthy. They're not, because it's not all about curriculum. It's about curriculum and 8 or 10 other things. And so you need to make sure that as you're walking through these features, A, you're not boring people, and B, you're not focusing on things that aren't that can be easily said to be the same as what you get at a less expensive or a, quote, free public school. Some schools have more to explain, meaning if a boarding school, they've got to walk through a different level of they have a little bit more detail in these core presentations. But again, you'll know what you need to do in order to walk through those pieces and how you can make your presentation stronger than other boarding schools. This slide is really 4 slides, as each group has its own requirements. Students, the real magic is finding the right kids. Having a diverse group on several levels. Again, work only with students who know the school, who've had positive experiences, who are unfailingly articulate, who can think on their feet, who can speak extemporaneously, and ideally, who have some measure of charm and genuine self-confidence. I'd recommend that those students start with remarks. They should not have stats. They should not be canned. You ask them to put something together for you, and when they give you a paper for their English class or history class, shred it, meaning go in there and make it a conversation. You know, they will tend to want to sort of make a statement and then support that statement, and they'll want to do it formally the way they've been taught by your school. But this is you know, an opportunity for little lessons on how you deal with an interview situation, how you deal with a presentation situation, how you answer questions, how you lean forward, what their body language is. The focal point of each student's remarks should be distinct from one another, without redundancy, framed in your training with, I want you, the student, to focus on this aspect of the school, and dividing up those aspects according to your needs, co-curricular, being a new student, the value of community, and of course academics, for example, ideally. You should rarely have index cards, and you don't want 100% alpha male or female superstars. As you decide on allocation of remarks, ask them what they would like to talk about, provide some but not too many guidelines, and then ask for a glimpse in advance, but again, avoid the scripted sound and feel. One of the key pieces is the ability to know during these when to step in delicately, when not to step in, and when to step in delicately with, for example, that is how it is sometimes, but the reality is this. The students will simply make mistakes, and you have to make sure that you're aware of where they might have, you know, opened up a can of worms, and when they're inaccurate, and to move things along. But you want to appear as though you're really letting them out there on their own. Parents love to listen to students. Faculty. A faculty panel can take a number of directions, and it depends fundamentally on the nature of the school, the range of students' ages, the school's philosophy, the niche in a competitive private school market. But the strategy of this part of an open house has core requirements. A breakdown by faculty members into distinct points that each appeal to different segments of your audience. A breakdown by subject, perhaps, but also a breakdown by personality, style, and background of the faculty member. Guidelines are key. For all of these people, they should have guidelines well in advance. And a conversation that asks faculty what they would like to accomplish and allows faculty members to know your goals and asks for a measure of synchronicity with the broader objectives of the program will likely be met with understanding. I've actually stopped having a faculty panel as a main part of my open house because I like to have that opportunity at the breakout sessions, because it's too long sitting in one place. But you'll know better how much time people will have and how much latitude you have to do that. Some schools have the faculty talking points involve a measure of audience engagement. Parents who are prepared to invest in school normally have a measure of affection for that and like being able to engage. Sometimes they'll have, this is what I would do in a class. I think I talked to a very good school in Baltimore that part of their second visit program involved 2-minute classrooms. So you go to class for 2 or 3 minutes and they give a presentation, then you jump to the next class. So you basically go through a day in a half an hour or 40 minutes. And that faculty member shines, and then the next parent group comes through, and then they keep moving along, so they get little glimpses and a very stimulating experience. Parents and alumni. Parents and alumni panel prep can take a similar course. Both sets of folks should know your open house goals, be very familiar with your advantages, and how you answer tough questions. For divisional breakout sessions. For schools that do not have separate divisions, the breakout sessions obviously are unnecessary. Schools that do, the core presentations focus on advantages can allow the breakout session to be more focused on the information, the features, and less on differentiatable advantages. But each of these administrative leaders cannot lose sight of the open house's broader goals and strategy, meaning we've got to show why we're better. And we don't want to bore them, because the head will have talked 7 minutes, you will have talked 15 or 20 minutes, There will have been a kind of moment where the kids will have engaged families with just a Q&A and a very brief presentation, so they'll be engaged again. Then they're going to have a chance to stretch their legs going to the breakout sessions, which can be in a different, and I'd suggest they be in a different place just to get people moving. But if you have a division head who likes to talk, that can be dangerous. Don't have someone chat for 50 minutes about details about how college counselors work with 10th graders. I mean, you want a college counselor to be able to walk. We work with 10th graders. Here's an example. Move along. Not this is what we do, and this is what the essay looks like that we ask the parents to fill out. You know, you're basically needing to have everybody on the same team about the sales component or quality to the open house day. Again, there should be as much synchronicity and as little redundancy as possible when you're working in these breakout sessions. The tour, again, almost universally our schools are strong in this area, but here are some thoughts. When tour guides are trained, don't be afraid to let them understand the importance of their role, that they're at the center of any parent's visit. Some schools even say, these families are thinking of spending $165,000 for high school. You are at the center of their decision making, just to give them a sense of importance. Now, that could terrify them. You may decide it's a terrible idea. I don't do that. But the reality is that is what they're doing. This is what people will remember. And what I sometimes do is talk about the notion of the tour as almost a competition of sorts. They're going to talk to us, and then they're going to go talk to Milton. And you don't want Milton to beat us, or they're going to go talk to Middlesex. You don't want Middlesex to beat us. And that gets their fire. You know, I really want to do a good job. You want to get their intensity, enthusiasm up, get the blood going. But also not, you don't want to have them go overboard. The training should have, this isn't a comedy show. These families are going to be spending a tremendous amount of money, or away spending a tremendous amount of money. And this piece of it is going to be probably what they remember more than a private talk with the admission director or some associate or some person who's paid to provide remarks in their minds. Tour guides absolutely need a handbook, and they need that expectation of excellence that goes with it. The handbook should have much more than you would ever expect them to remember, but enough that they'll have plenty to consider. They'll find their own way. They'll gravitate to anecdotes that work for them, but you need to emphasize that parents want stories, not stats. Have the stats, but encourage the stories. It needs an explanation of how to deal with the toughest questions, meaning the handbook and the training. They really have to have, here is a tough question, here are 3 different ways you can answer this. And the handbook shouldn't be flimsy. Make the investment in making it look like something they should take seriously. They are at the core of your success. Tour guides need to have high expectations, and they need to be rewarded in ways both big and small. We do it by giving them Starbucks cards. At another school I worked for, we had a big lobster dinner at the end of the year, and it was a fabulous way of saying thanks. And anybody who says it's not worth it to spend that much money on a tour guide is out of their mind. They're an incredibly important part of marketing the school, and you could almost not spend too much on tour guides as a way of saying thank you for the important work they're doing, provided they're doing a good job. Do any of you have, and again, we've had some success with this, do any of you have questions for me?
Peter, I do have a question here regarding tour guides, and one of the last comments that you made was, you know, if they're doing a good job, you want to reward them. Are there metrics that you measure with regards to tour guides and applications and that type of success?
That's a very good thing to do. We don't. Part of it is we've had such success with our tour guides, and we're a small office. So we've had to prioritize and say, okay, what's the area where we're struggling? And tour guides isn't it. So we focus on other areas. But that's a good idea. What you can do is, well, I'll tell you what a very good boarding school, maybe one of the best, does, is they have a very brief parent thing. You know, how was your tour? How did it go? And they can give some feedback. And, you know, it's like an index card, and they pop it in a box. And that way, you've got a kind of check, and if somebody says this was terrible, they brought us into a dorm room that was a total mess, you can have some feedback. And you have the same thing for the tour guides, where they say, you know, this family kept asking questions about X, Y, or Z. So there are tactics for doing that. Our office is too small, and our competition is not good enough for us to make that worth our while. Our competition in terms of getting people in the door is very high. Our competition once people get in the door is not. So, but that's a very good possibility. I'm not the guy for giving you an evaluation of that in terms of spreading it into data, because where I've been so far in admission, at least in my current job as director of admission, I haven't needed to do that.
Okay, thank you. We have some great questions rolling in. Maggie's asking, to what do you primarily attribute the increase in your open house attendance and application numbers?
Well, that you'd need to go to the, well, the application numbers, 40% of it came from a special parent admission network program that I put together and talked about in the last presentation. And 40% came from a merit scholarship program we put together in conjunction with Franklin and Marshall College, Lancaster General Health, and St. Joe's Medical Center, and a bunch of other community partners with a really, what I think is a really novel tactic for generating word-of-mouth conversations. But in terms of the open house, it has been also the Parent Admission Network and these other tactics for increasing our inquiries. We focus a lot, excuse me, on word-of-mouth tactics and on internal marketing to our parents, getting those parents inside the building really happy and informed about our advantages in a manner that allows them to communicate successfully with their friends.
Thank you. Maggie, the recording of the last webinar is available on admission.org/webinars if you want to go to that, as well as a PDF of Peter's slides. So, and one of his previous webinars, he also gave me the flyer that he uses for that merit scholarship program. So you might want to just take a look at our webinar page, and you'll find a lot of those resources there. Terry is asking, do you use student or parent tour guides or both?
We use only student tour guides. Part of it is I think we would find it difficult. Well, I mean, there are schools that do have parent tour guides and that swear by it. And it does guarantee a level of professionalism. I think you lose some measure of the spontaneity and the outcome-based decision-making that families are often inclined to do. You know, families feel like, wow, this school really trusts these teenagers. I think so much of it depends on really having faith that your upper school students or those older students. Now, if you're K through 8, you don't have a choice. You have to have parents. So with that, I would just make sure that you have an elaborate training program for those parents, and that you come back to it, and that maybe you really make it just, you know, you might want to have them be on some sort of semi-salary, part-time, something or other, because you need to be able to leverage your relationship with them. One of the dangers of volunteers when their parents doing tours is that you can't say to them, hey, you know, that one didn't go so well. We need to talk. And if you can't talk candidly with your parents because your head's going to get mad at you if you notice that somebody's doing something that's costing the school hundreds of thousands of dollars, then you got a problem. You know, you can't have that happen. And, you know, the head's job is to raise money and have everybody happy who might want to give money, and your job is to make sure the tour goes well. So you've got to sort of sort out, like, how is the reporting arrangement going to be so that you can really have the leverage to say, we got to shift this, we got, you know, or you just have to have a wonderful relationship with that parent where you can be completely candid with them without running into trouble keeping them happy and supportive of the school.
Kelly would like to know, do you have weekday open houses, and are you able to use students as guides for those weekday open house events?
I referenced this briefly at the beginning. It's a very good question, and I'm glad it's brought up again. We don't have weekday open houses, but I know people that do. And we talked to one very good school recently. One of my associates and I drove down to Baltimore and talked to a wonderful school that does not do weekend open houses. They feel like they have too many people show up who don't, and the yield isn't good. Our yield tends to be good. We have ours on Sunday at 12:45. It's our experience that parents are really, really busy. And to try and expect that you're going to get a lot of traffic on a Wednesday afternoon, that's a lot to ask. It's a lot to expect. And so we would rather have, in the week, we'd rather have private tours and then the tour guide, or the open house rather program on the weekend. But every school, you know your market. What I would do is recommend playing around with it. Whatever works is what you should do. Whatever works best. My concern, I will add, sorry, my concern is that whatever you do, you need to own the open house. It can't, I don't like the idea of having people kind of wander and just bounce into classes. I think when you have 50 different sets of faculty potentially charged with performing, your ability to know that the outcomes of the open house are good are necessarily going to be compromised a little bit. You know, will all the faculty remember that that's the day? Are people going to walk into to a bunch of 8th graders taking the Latin test? You know, and then they got to walk out the door and say, well, why did they schedule a Latin test on their open house day? I want to know about Latin. I can't find out about Latin because they have a Latin test. You know, so that would be one of my concerns. But you may want to weigh that, or you might want to say, here are the classes that you can see. Or you have the open house during a block where you can set it up in a manner like I talked about earlier, where you have people go through 5 minutes of science, 5 minutes of math, 5 minutes of middle school history, 5 minutes, you know, and they see all these experiences, and then, you know, but it works during the day, and as long as you have faculty who are willing to take the time to set that up just right, you're good. And you might find, who knows, people may have more time during the week than they do on the weekends, or they don't want to give up their weekends. We do 3 open houses a year. It's worked well for us.
Excellent, thank you. Ala is asking if you could generally go over how you train your tour guides, I guess sort of the 30,000 feet approach. If you ask me for that, I can send you the handbook. But we make an offer. We basically find the people that we really want, and we ask people at assembly to sign up for open houses. But then we make specific invitations that we put on the lockers of the students we really think would be great. And we're open almost to anybody. I mean, most people. Well, we're lucky. We're at a school where 90% of kids could do a tour really well. It's a very good program here. I'm lucky. So we invite them in. We have a pizza lunch, and then we walk through. What we do is we then say, okay, we're gonna, and that's just a sort of welcoming lunch. But then I then hand out the handbook and say, you need to schedule and join one of the 7 or 8 broader tour guide training sessions this fall. And then I give a tour with each one of them, and I walk through the tour, and I quiz them using the hand. What would you say here? What would you say here? What have you said here in the past? What do you think works? And they're expected during that to be able to give answers. And then you let them, you say to them, if you need to shadow with somebody else, anybody who's never done it before has to shadow. If you want to shadow twice, you can do that. And just give them the latitude. They'll know. They're not going to want to make a fool of themselves. They're going to know when they're ready, when they're not. And generally, our kids are mature enough to say, I need another chance before I go out on my own. And it's worked out pretty well. And I just go overboard with my handbook. It's 8 pages long, and it's got a lot of material in there. And what I do is I say, I don't say all of these things when I give a tour. I tell them,
but I know what works for me and what I feel works with parents. And in that, there's sort of broader tips, ideas for keeping people engaged. What do you do when you're crossing through two gyms and there's a lot of open air where everybody can kind of get silent? You know, what do you do then? Well, you have 6 questions that you always have at the ready. Where are you from? What sports do you play? What do you like? Did you go to private school when you were, before this? Or what school are you at now? All those pieces can fill those spaces, but it's all the little tactics and little tips and all of that sort of go into what we do in terms of training.
Excellent, thank you. We have a couple questions about the number and timing of your open houses. You mentioned you have 3 open houses. When do you hold them during the year?
Well, every school's and there are sets of schools that have different admission seasons. Our admission season is, we have 2 sort of sets of mailing dates, one in early February and one in early April. Day schools in certain markets send out in late January, early February, their decisions. Others do it, the boarding schools all send out on March 10th and expect everything back on April 10th. So it just depends. So we plan our open houses accordingly. We have one November 11th or so, one January 25th or so, and one March 25th or so.
Thanks so much. Arezu is asking, what's your metric to know the percentage of applications that are coming from your Parent Ambassador Network or your scholarship program, et cetera?
How do we determine that?
Yes.
Oh, what I do is when my Parent Admission Network send me in the names of any families that they've recommended visit the school as they're talking to them. Those go into a box, the hard copy, and I keep tabs on the email as well. At the end of the year, I then look at that family, and depending on, we're not a huge school. We have only maybe 300 applications a year for 100 places. And so qualitatively, I know families well enough to know, listen, this family, they're a sibling. This is not a Parent Admission Network a nudge that did this. They would have come no matter what, or they're likely to have come no matter what. Or they're an alum. But it's the people from a distant county who somebody said, you've talked to that Parent Admission Network volunteer, and they've said, this is someone I talked to. There are people who at the open house said, why are you here? I had a conversation with so-and-so. So I collect all that data, and that data informs my assessment of where our and that 40% is not just Parent Admission Network. It's the Parent Admission Network and internal marketing. I ask people who are not Parent Admission Network trained but are just current parents who are happy to send along invitations to our open house or to come on a private tour of the school. And that feedback, and we have a website page, it's called Refer a Friend, and that generates that generates a certain traction too, and so those tally up to about 40% of my growth. Another 40% come from the merit program, and that's pretty self-evident. A lot of our merit programs are from in distant counties. These are not people that would have inquired were it not for the merit program that put me in front of those people up in those distant counties.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
And that represents about 40%. Yeah, yep.
Sorry about that.
No, that's all.
It looks like we're pretty much at the end of our questions at this point. So I'll let you give your closing remarks, and then I'll wrap it up.
I would just share that I'd be happy if people want to email me directly. I will. I mean, SSATB is wonderful in providing me your email addresses, and I promise I won't, use them for anything bad. But I will write a little email that says, if you want anything, please email me, and I'll send you whatever materials you want. You're free to ignore that, and you will only get one from me unless you email back and say I want to know more, and then obviously I'm going to follow up to help you. But that is a great opportunity for you to just get answers and ask ask any questions you might have that maybe you don't feel like asking right now. And thanks for listening.
I want to thank our audience for tuning in, and a special thank you to Peter for providing us with this insightful webinar. Just a reminder, a recording of this presentation and Peter's slides will be made available on the webinar page in the professional development section on admission.org. Thanks again, and have a great day.